In chapter 2 of A Game of Thrones, we were introduced to Catelyn Stark. Her nickname is Cat, short for Catelyn. She is his wife. She has given him all of his true-born children. As we learn at the start of the chapter, she is born a Tully of Riverrun. I'll show you on the map where that is so you can get an idea of how far her hometown is from Winterfell, which is where she is now, as she lives with her husband, Ned or Eddard Stark, Lord Eddard Stark of Winterfell. Um, this land is the land they currently live in now in the north, Winterfell. It's just worth noting that it's a completely different environment from Riverrun, which is south of Winterfell. And Catelyn feels as if she can never get used to the weather of the north, since the two atmospheres are polar opposites. To compare that, like geographically, it'd be like how in the state of California, here in the United States, the southern region of California that's closer to Mexico, it's kind of known as Mexicali, that area right there. It's drastically warmer there as opposed to the northern part of California or even the state above it directly, Oregon. It obviously snows all throughout the land, so that's just a little bit of a comparison of the weather. But the north, obviously, here in A Game of Thrones, it's more so like depending on the area and the time, right? Like almost like Alaska or even Antarctica in a way. That's more so, I guess, beyond the wall in that area where the Night's Watch is. But just to kind of give you an idea of the weather and how it's a big change for her, especially considering she grew up, right? So the chapter officially begins with Catelyn confessing to herself, just thinking that she does not like the Godswood of Winterfell, which I will now show. And the Godswood is usually just like a place where within each kind of castle or keep or wherever any type of noble or royalty uh, families or whatever, they'll have like a place called the Godswood, and it'll just kind of be like almost like a kind of garden like area with a bunch of trees and plants. And in Winterfell, it's a lot more holy for them, for the people of Winterfell and Northerners, because they that's where they pray, because it serves as their church, a chapel, even a priest in a way of speaking, without not necessarily being an actual septon, as that's what they're called in the books and shows. They're called septons. That's aka a priest, right, in modern language. Um, Septas, right? Septas as well. They're kind of like nuns, but they serve different purposes, and they kind of like teach the girls like how to be a lady, right? A proper lady. But it's at this point in the book where it's just already introducing us to a part of religion, the religion in the Game of Thrones books, just a series of the Song of Ice and Fire. There are many different forms of gods, and slash, just forms of worship, just like there are in real life. I'm sure these different religions are inspired by different religions in real life. It just makes sense, right? But just to list a few religions slash the different gods that are believed or exist all throughout the different lands of Westeros and Essos. And we have the Seven, which is a popular or the main religion of Westeros throughout the Seven Kingdoms. Um, that's what they refer to a lot. You'll hear, I'm sure, throughout the books them say it like seven hells or seven be praised or whatever, right? Um, and there's this is a quote, I think, from the wiki, where there is one god who has seven faces: the father, the mother, the maiden, the crone, the warrior, the smith, and the stranger. These are the seven faces of God for them, right? each one representing a specific thing. I found this post, I want to say from Reddit here, giving a little description of what each uh figure is meant to represent. So first we have the father, and he is meant to represent divine justice. And then we have the mother, and she's meant to represent mercy, peace, and fertility. For the mother, you'll hear a lot of times when people are on their deathbed or facing some form of death or conflict, they'll cry out, "Mother, have mercy." It's a very popular kind of phrase, I guess, for a lot of different people. Um, the maiden, the maiden represents innocence, love, and beauty. Then there's the crone. The crone represents wisdom. Um, then there is the warrior, and he represents strength and courage in battle. Then there is the smith. The smith represents creation and craftsmanship. A lot of people who like a lot of times people identify as these different um seven faces, right? And just to kind of give a little bit of an example, right? A lot of like people who work manual labor, they'll kind of like give a little bit of extra love to the smith, right? Um, Maybe same thing for like the royal family or whatever, the different lords and kings or whatever. They'll pray more to the father for needing help for a big judgment or law, or if causing someone sentencing someone for execution. You know, they'll pray to one specific uh member of the seven to help them for whatever they need or want for their specific needs, right? For the smith, he represents creation and craftsmanship. That's why, like I said, a lot of people who work labor kind of identify as the smith, and they kind of pray to the smith and maybe make offering or sacrifices to the smith. Um, and finally, there's the stranger, and this is meant to represent death. So for the stranger, kind of what's associated with him too is that what's in the show are the Silent Sisters. They're really associated with the stranger as well. And then just a few other gods that exist throughout the Seven Kingdoms and Essos. We have the old gods, which is actually what the Northerners worship. We'll get more into that later in the chapter. But for the seven gods, as I previously mentioned, just want to also state that is what Catelyn worships and practices, and she is a devout believer in that. Despite marrying Ned, I don't believe she doesn't adapt his religion, respects it, doesn't like try to convert him to hers or hate him for it or whatever, but she is still at heart a Tully of Riverrun, and she is not letting that part of her go. So she is still a devout believer in the seven, which is comes up constantly throughout the chapter. And so after the old gods, like I said, that's what the Northerners worship towards the old gods. We have the Lord of Light, and that's what some other characters worship throughout the book. We'll kind of let. I'm not gonna get into too specifics of these other ones, because I'm just mainly focusing on both the old gods and the new gods, as these seven are known as. Um, but as I said, I'm just naming a few others just to give an example. But there's a bunch of different religions and gods in the books. But I'm just kind of naming just a few of the kind of, I guess, popular ones, right? That come up. I want to say this early in the book. Um, but we had the Lord of Light, the Drowned God. The Drowned God is mainly worshipped by Theon Greyjoy's people on the Iron Islands. That's where they believe in the drowned god, and like I said, make sacrifices and pray and worship to the drowned god. He's kind of like, if I had to say, like Poseidon, you know, in a way, a manner of speaking. Then there's the many face god, and this is kind of another face, or kind of god of death, if you will. The Grim Reaper kind of thing, right? But this is associated with a kind of, not kind of, but basically a death cult, if you will, with the Faceless Men, which is a assassin guild. They're pretty fucking cool and interesting, to tell you the truth. But that's not gonna be for a long, 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 long time. But I'm sure at some point they might reference them in this book. But that's who they are. If you're familiar with the show and if you watched up to the later seasons, I'm sure you're familiar with them. But they're pretty fucking cool. Then after that, there's the Great Stallion, and he's the god that the Dothraki believe in, and the Dothraki are a group of kind of like raiders and or an army, a militia, you know. Um, they kind of just don't have well, I'm not gonna get into them like I said anyways. Otherwise this is be even longer than than I intend for it to be. Kind of the reason why I get so behind on these videos. I do apologize for that. Gonna try and get ahead. Might start releasing these in parts, so do look out for that as a result of, instead of having these long 40, 20, 30, 40, whatever minute videos, I'm just gonna have part one, part two, part three for whatever chapters, you know, as I break these down, just to try and get more videos out. But as we continue in this chapter,